It's cold out here. It won't be cold on a boat, on a beach, no snow. It'll be nice.
Don't you know it sometimes snows in the ocean?
What?
Aren't you supposed to be at the live event with Mote
shoot.
Marine Laboratory?
Yes.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, I made it. I made it to the show. Hello, everyone. And now that I thawed off from that run from the slopes, let us get this snow show on the road. I'm your host, George, and I cannot wait for today's adventure. Two things to remember before we get started. Use the chat to ask your questions and have those cameras handy because we're going to take some pictures later on in the show. You saw it's been a cold, snowy day here in the bold north of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I am right now. And whether you're also enjoying some snow, rain, or sunshine, or wherever you are, I'm excited to welcome you back, as well as our special guest, Jason from the Mote Marine Laboratory, to help us celebrate this winter season. How's it going, Jason?
Oh, it's great. And I'm trying to send some warm weather up to you from Florida. You said it's snowing up there, right, George?
It is, Jason.
Well, it's 78 degrees down here in Florida and very warm. In fact, let me go ahead and show you on my map exactly where I'm speaking to you from. We're here just a few miles south of Tampa Bay in sunny Sarasota, Florida, where Mote Marine Laboratory and Aquarium is located. And if you've never been here before, well, it's a public aquarium. We're open 365 days of the year. So hopefully you get a chance to maybe come down and enjoy some warm weather sometime soon and maybe see some of the animals and creatures that we're going to be talking about today. All right. Well, George, you said it's cold up there, and I'm kind of curious if you've kind of looked around in your environment. Have you ever noticed what the animals are doing when it gets cold out there? Have you ever seen birds migrating?
I have. I feel like I've seen them kind of like, in the migration pattern, which is that V, I think to go south to warmer weather. Is that right?
Yeah. A lot of times the birds, they know what's going on. And so when the cold weather starts to come in, many species will come down south to Florida and points further below to get away from that cold weather. What about the other creatures that are around in your world? Have you ever noticed what the squirrels and the mammals are doing?
Yeah, I believe they're hibernating, kind of trying to stay warm, burrowing themselves up for the winter.
Yeah. So mammals, on the other hand, they can't fly south for the winter. So a lot of times they'll bulk up and get a nice layer of fat. Not everyone around in the world needs to wait till winter to get that big, but a lot of the squirrels and other animals will put on a nice big thick layer of fat for the winter. They'll also get nice and fuzzy, and a lot of them will also hibernate. And so that's one of the observations you can make. But what about the plants? What are they doing when it gets cold? Have you ever noticed what trees and other things do?
Yeah, I think I know this. They quite literally, the leaves fall. So they kind of change color. They drop down through the colder temperatures.
Yeah, plants go dormant, so those squirrels and other animals need to gather their nuts while they may and go ahead and bulk up and store up those in their nests. But what about people? What were you doing in the very beginning there in order to stay warm? What do you have on, and what do you have on right now?
Oh, what I have on right now? We like to layer up. We like to put our hats, our gloves, our boots, things that don't keep us dry and warm. Just staying warm is the biggest thing.
Yeah, so you can stay warm with lots of layers. And the folks in my household, a lot of times what they like to do is click that thermostat on up and try to keep warm that way. And then another thing that a lot of people do, especially in your area of the world, is come down south just like those birds, trade in the blinding white snow for some bright white sandy beaches here in Florida. So they migrate, and we call those snowbirds. Now, George, there's one thing that kind of worries me about the cold. What happens when you're both cold and wet? What does that feel like?
It's the worst. It's miserable. It is something, the feeling you want to immediately end.
Yeah, so it's no fun to be both cold and wet. Anybody out there in the program, have you ever had that experience before? Ever had snow in your boots and then have it melt? Not a pleasant feeling. So that kind of makes me wonder, what about the animals that live underneath the waves? What about aquatic animals? What do they do when it gets both cold and wet? And so that's one of the things we're going to be talking about today as we learn whether or not it actually snows in the ocean. And specifically, we're going to look at these three kinds of animals. These are the kinds of animals that we study here at our marine laboratory in Florida. We look at sharks, sea turtles, and marine mammals. And specifically, we're going to be talking about manatees. Maybe you remember our program from November where we saw those marvelous manatees and learned a little bit more about them. Well, we're going to revisit them a little bit today and learn what they do when the weather gets cold. But what exactly is winter in the first place? Well, let's go ahead and zoom back out into space to try to figure this out. And so in order to understand what winter is and why winter means cold weather, it all starts with the Earth. Now, our Earth is a planet spinning in space, and the Earth revolves around the sun. So, George, how long does it take the Earth to go around the sun each year?
I think it's about as long as the Mote Marine Laboratory is open, so 365 days.
Yeah, exactly. It takes a year, 365 days for our planet to go around the sun. And that is an interesting image that you see right there. A lot of people think that the seasons are caused by the Earth moving farther or closer to the sun, but that's not really true. In fact, the Earth is actually a little closer to the sun in January and a little bit further away in July. So it's not the position of the Earth. Instead, it's actually what you see in this image right here. It's the tilt of the Earth that causes the seasons. And as we can see from this video from our friends at the Cal Academy, the Earth is actually tilted at about 23.4 degree angle. And that means that during half the year, that northern part of the Earth is actually pointed away from the sun. And the other half is pointed towards the sun. So when the north is pointed away, well, that's what we call winter. And the reason it gets colder in winter is because, well, there's just less sunlight warming up the north. And so the length of days change throughout the year, and the amount of light, and thereby the amount of heat changes too, all because of the way the Earth is tilted on its axis as it rotates around the sun. And an interesting thing about the way the world works is if it's winter up here in the northern hemisphere, what weather is it down south? It's the opposite. So it's summer down there right now in Australia and other areas in the southern hemisphere. Kind of fun. Now we're going to talk about animals that deal with the cold weather. Now we know what causes winter. Let's look at one of them that does it as a champion. And this is the Arctic tern. We talked a little bit about what birds do during wintertime. And this animal is fantastic. It actually has the ability to fly over 70,000 kilometers. That's 44,000 miles from that area up there in red, where their northern breeding grounds are around Iceland and the Arctic. It will fly all the way down to that area in blue on the map to the Antarctic coast for the southern summer, and then do it all again 6 months later. Absolutely fantastic champion migrator. So that's how that animal deals with the cold. And what about this one? The North Atlantic right whale. You can probably guess where this animal is located because in the name it is found in the North Atlantic, as you see on that map. They typically are found off the coast of Massachusetts and Newfoundland. That's during the summer, spring, and autumn. But in the winter, they're snowbirds too, even though they're whales. They head on south to Georgia and Florida to give birth to their young. Yeah. In addition to migration, another way that these whales deal with cold weather is because they have a very thick layer of fat. George, do you know what the fat inside a whale is called?
Is it blubber?
Yeah, so they have a blubber layer inside of there, which is a thick layer of fat. In fact, up to 45% of the weight of a right whale's body can be blubber. And not only does that blubber act as insulation, it's also a food reserve for them and allows them to make those long migrations. So it's like having a big, thick, fluffy coat, or if you were a scuba diver, like having a really thick wetsuit. And you can actually kind of see what this is like with a little bit of an experiment. If you got your phone handy or another device, you can scan this QR code and have a fun STEM science activity. What you do is you take a bag, fill it full of cooking fat, something like Crisco or another thing, and then stick your hand inside that ooey gooey fat, and then stick that bag into an ice cold bucket of water and see if your hand gets cold. If it does, then that insulation isn't working. But if it doesn't get cold, then maybe you're acting like a whale, and you can see what that is like with the insulating fat that those animals have. But we'll see very quickly here, not all of the animals we're going to be talking about have those strategies. Let's head on over to one of my favorite creatures, the sharks. Now, we have lots of sharks that live here in our waters in Florida, and then one in particular is famous for migrating up and down our coast. This is the black-tip shark. Everyone look really closely at that picture on the left. All those little black peppered spots, those are dozens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of these black-tip sharks migrate up and down the Florida coast. They're moving north to North Carolina in the summer and down south to Florida in the winter by the thousands. And they're actually not only avoiding the cold weather, they're also following the spawning migrations of their favorite food, which are bait fish. So we are famous here off the coast of Jupiter, near Miami, on our east coast, to have thousands of these sharks getting away from the cold weather. But here's another animal that kind of likes the cold weather. This is the Greenland shark. George, where do you think the Greenland shark likes to live?
You know, I want to say it's Greenland.
Yeah, you're right. The Greenland shark, hence the name, lives in Greenland. And this shark seems to like the cold. Normally we find it living in the Arctic waters around Iceland and Greenland, and it's big. That other shark, the black-tip shark, only grows to about 6 feet in length, about 2 meters, but the Greenland shark grows over 7 meters long. That's about 24 feet. Another fascinating fact about this animal is scientists have recently discovered that it's one of the oldest living animals in the world. It can actually live over 400 years or more. Fascinating. So there are some sharks out there in the ocean that might have been around the time of Shakespeare. Absolutely incredible. So if this shark loves the cold so much, why did our scientists recently discover it off the tropical coral reefs of Belize? Well, it turns out this species may be using the cold waters that are found down deep in the ocean to travel farther and wider than scientists ever realized. In fact, if you descend in the ocean, the temperatures will drop very quickly. In fact, it could be about 24 degrees centigrade or 75 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface, but as you go down to about 600 meters or about 2,000 feet where the Greenland sharks like to live, you can get down to almost freezing cold water. Another interesting fact about these deep sea creatures, the ones that like the cold and like the deep, they oftentimes have antifreeze inside their blood. They have special proteins in their tissue that keeps their blood from freezing in place, and that's how they can survive in these extreme conditions. And if you'd like to find out more about that, I've got a whole sway interactive exhibit online. Get your cameras out again if you want to capture that QR code, or we'll put it up on the recording afterwards. And you can find out more about all the shark research that we do here at our lab, and also learn about our famous director, Dr. Eugenie Clark, the Shark Lady. All right, so we talked a lot about, my friends, the sharks, but now we're going to move on to another group of creatures that we really love here at Mote, and those are reptiles. So, George, are reptiles cold-blooded or warm-blooded?
Cold-blooded. Yeah?
Yep, indeed, they are, in fact, cold-blooded. In fact, you may remember from a previous episode where we did a flip event about sea turtles, we had a visit from our friend Sam, the box turtle, and we learned all about these cold-blooded animals. But an interesting fact about these animals is they do not hibernate if they're stuck in the cold. Instead, look at this new science word for you. Let's see if you know what this is. Have you ever heard of this word, George? Brumation.
I can't say I have. Oof.
Crazy looking word, but this is the kind of hibernation that reptiles or cold-blooded creatures go through. It's kind of a sluggishness or torpor that they go through whenever they get cold during an extended winter or during low temperatures. So reptiles do it a little bit differently than mammals. They cool down, so that box turtle like Sam will actually crawl down into the dirt, maybe burrow down and just kind of hang out and literally chill underneath the pond or in the ground. But what about sea turtles? Those are the kinds of animals that we study here at Mote Marine Laboratory. They can't burrow. And in fact, what a lot of these sea turtle species do is they just never go in the cold at all. This is a green sea turtle. There are 7 different species of sea turtles in the world, and we find the green sea turtles, loggerheads, Kemp's ridleys, and hawksbill sea turtles visiting our beaches here in Florida. And it's warm down here. A lot of them live in the Caribbean and in the tropics, so that's one of the ways that they handle the cold weather. But there is one species of sea turtle out there that kind of likes the cold water, and that's this one. Do you recognize what this creature is? You can type it into the chat, or maybe, George, do you recognize the largest sea turtle in the world?
I do not.
This is the leatherback sea turtle, an ancient lineage of sea turtles that's found in open oceans around the world, both in tropical, subtropical, and even Arctic waters. And these sea turtles are bigger than a human being. In fact, they're so massive that just the movement of their muscles and their gigantic size allows them to retain some of the body heat that they generate. And so they don't lose everything into their environment like most reptiles do. Instead, they're able to swim into waters that other sea turtles simply cannot go. They're oftentimes found in Arctic waters. But unfortunately, sometimes our friends, the sea turtles, do get caught up in the warm water currents off the east coast of the United States, and they get a little bit lost. And what happens is if a tropical turtle like the green sea turtle or the Kemp's ridley end up in that warm Gulf Stream and end up going too far north, if they stay going north too long, they could actually end up with a condition called being cold stunned. And it's not a great thing for them. So I'm going to cut away to a quick video right here to tell you a little bit about how we rescue some of these creatures when they end up being cold stunned. So let's check it out. And here you can see we've got our aquarium. This is what it looks like when you visit Mote Marine Laboratory. And we've got a special shipment coming in from the airport here, SRQ. It's a shipment from New England where we've got a couple of Kemp's Ridley sea turtles that have been packaged up and shipped down to us because they actually ended up spending too much time up there near Massachusetts and in cold, cold waters at this time of year. Fortunately, the New England Aquarium and other groups were able to rescue these animals, get them out of the cold water where they were basically stunned. They couldn't swim around anymore, and brought them onto the airplanes and sent them down here to Mote Marine Laboratory in Florida so that we can heat them back up and rehabilitate them. This will happen in Texas, Florida, Georgia. There's lots of rescue centers that will take in these cold temperature turtles and bring them back to the places where they're supposed to be. Turtles are pretty smart, but every once in a while they lose their way by getting caught up in those big ocean currents and going up too far north. And so we do everything we can in our power to bring them back down here, and slowly they bring them back to health. They're very slow and cold and sluggish at first. We nurse them back to health with the best kind of diet. And then our ultimate goal is to release them back out into the environment where they came from. And here you can see we put little crayon markings on the back. Those are just temporary markings that we use to kind of help identify them. I don't know about you, but it's kind of hard for me to tell one sea turtle apart from another. And so those little temporary crayon markings on the back, like this one for Georgie, who sometimes we will name them, help us to figure which one is which. And so like a good scientist, we measure them, we weigh them, and make sure that they're perfectly ready to go back out into the environment and back out into the ocean. You can find out more about that by going to mote.org/hospital. And I also have a Flipgrid discovery topic out there about our sea turtle hospital if you ever want to check that out. Yeah, so that is how we deal with the sea turtles here at Mote Marine Laboratory. But if you remember earlier, I've got one more group of animals I want to share with you, and that's our marvelous manatees. Hugh and Buffett, our resident West Indian manatees here at Mote Marine Laboratory. We got to meet them back in November for our fantastic flip event back then. But they are found throughout the state of Florida. Now, unlike whales and dolphins and other marine mammals, manatees, even though they look like a big old floating baked potato, there's actually not a lot of blubber on these sea creatures. Yeah, even though they're big and bulky, not a lot of fat on these animals at all. It's mostly their organs and bones inside of there. So how do manatees stay warm? Well, what they do is they go to warm water refuges around the state. They have learned through instinct to go into our rivers and streams to these springs where the water temperature stays a constant degree all year round, between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit all year round. And so those are warm water refuges for the manatees. And these are found throughout the state of Florida, not only in our freshwater rivers and streams where they can escape the cold, freezing waters of the Gulf and the Atlantic during the wintertime. Another interesting fact is that they've discovered that they can swim up the canals of power plants. Yeah, so as power plants generate electricity, they send the warm water that they use to cool the power plants and generate that power out into cooling canals, and those are connected to the ocean. And here you can see we're zooming into Tico Power Plant near Tampa, and there's a manatee viewing area where you can see dozens, hundreds, even thousands of manatees sometimes. Unfortunately, manatees in Florida are not doing so well. There's a lot of areas where their habitat has been destroyed. And so the state of Florida is taking some extraordinary measures, especially on the East Coast, to try to rescue and rehabilitate them. You can find out more about manatees by visiting our website at mote.org or go to savethemanatee.org. This is a live view from their manatee cam up there at Homosassa Springs, where sometimes real live manatees will swim by in real time, and you can check it out. Looks like we're just seeing the Crevalle Jack over the springs right now. Well, George, I've talked a lot about the different creatures that live in the ocean. I want to share one more little group of creatures that call the ocean home during this time of year before we finally answer the question about whether it snows in the ocean. And so this is going to be kind of a guessing game. I'm going to put these creatures up on the screen, and I want to see if you can guess what their names are. And I'll give you a clue. Every single one of these creatures has a seasonal, wintry, holiday-inspired name. So, for example, this is an eel, as you probably guessed. And specifically, this is a what? Type it into the chat if you know. Or you can guess, George, if you want to take a stab at it.
Ooh, snowflake? Snowflake
the
moray.
Snowflake moray eel. And you can tell from its pattern of scales and skin that it has a kind of snowflakey pattern. So what do you think this sea creature is called?
Oh man, it looks like a candy cane. Is it a candy cane? Is it a
It's a shrimp, and it is the
shrimp?
candy cane shrimp, and they have
Oh,
a
no way.
symbiotic relationship with the little fish that they live with. The fish is a watchman goby that keeps an eye out for predators. The shrimps are pretty much blind, but they're great burrowers, so they are able to create a nice home for both the animals. All right, this is probably the craziest creature that we'll see here today. Does anyone want to take a guess what this kind of holiday creature is called?
I know. Nightmare Before Christmas.
That's a great one. Nightmare Before Christmas. This is
Man.
it's a type of shark. It's the
Cookie?
cookie cutter shark. Yeah. So take a look at the teeth on this animal. They're round and circular. And what they do is they'll actually swim up alongside another sea creature, take a round circular bite out the side, and swim away with a nice meal. They're kind of like the mosquitoes or parasites of the sea. They'll actually take a little plug of blubber out the side of a whale in order to feed. So kind of crazy looking creature. I just have a few more and then we're going to get to your questions. So what about this one? This is a tiny kind of snail.
Man, angel. Oh, is it? No way.
Yep, you got it. It's a sea angel. This is a little tiny swimming snail or mollusk that lives in the ocean. It's smaller than your fingernail usually, and they kind of flap around in the ocean, and they're the basis of a lot of food chains. They're up there in the plankton, and a lot of animals will eat these creatures. They're called pteropods. All right, this is a very unusual one. Does anyone have a guess what this might be?
Yeah, it kind of looks like like a bunch of candlesticks, maybe. I don't know. Oh, I see. Harp.
This is a sponge, if you can believe it. And not only is it a sponge, it's a carnivorous sponge. Sponge filter feed all the stuff that drifts down from the surface of the ocean in order to get their meal. But this one will actually have the ability to trap and eat little tiny shrimpies and other sea creatures. A really crazy creature that lives off the coast of California in very deep, deep water. A carnivorous sponge. Now, these are the jingle shells. We find these here in Florida. They're a type of snail. They're also called mermaid's toenails, which is kind of a less delightful story. But yeah, if you have a bunch of these in your pocket, they kind of jingle along. And then we've got two more that I want to share with you. This is another deep sea creature. It is the pine cone fish, and it actually bioluminesces. You can sometimes see these for sale in aquarium stores. It's a deep water, saltwater species. They have a little red patch underneath their eye that glows in the dark. And it kind of looks like the pattern of scales kind of reminds somebody of a pine cone. Last two creatures that I want to talk about is this one. These are a type of worm called the Christmas tree worm. These are animals that live on the coral reef, and these are also filter feeders. And what are these little filter feeders eating? Well, it's in this picture. Can you see what creature I'm imagining in this video, George?
I don't know.
Actually, it's not a creature. It is the topic of our video today.
No?
Snow, yeah. All those little white flaky bits that you see on the video here, that is how it snows in the ocean. Now, of course, we have real live icy snow up above the oceans, but underneath the waves, marine snow is what we're looking at. And that's all the flakes of animal poop, decaying plankton, and other types of organic matter that slowly sink to the sea floor. So a good rule of thumb is do not eat the marine snow unless you are a fish in the ocean. And so, yes, in fact, it does snow in the ocean, but it's not the icy snow that we see up there where you live, George. It's kind of all this weird stuff that is actually the basis of a lot of food chains. Most of the energy of the ocean starts up at the surface where we have lots of sunlight and plankton and phytoplankton living and eventually dying. And then they eventually settle down. And that ends up being food for things like those Christmas tree worms, those jingle shells, and also that sea harp. And so that is where we get the story of Does It Snow in the Ocean. How'd you like that story?
That is awesome, Jason. It's so informative and it sparked so many great questions coming in through the chat from learners all over the world. We have learners from Alaska, also can maybe feel the cold, I think, right now. South Carolina, Exeter in the UK, Morocco, Iowa, go Iowa, Hawaii, wow, Canada, California, New Jersey, Florida. Some of these places are making me really jealous of where I am right now. And we cannot wait to get to those questions in just a moment. But before we do, let's take a selfie. So if you didn't get a chance to grab your camera at the start of the event, get your cameras ready now. Gather in front of your screens in your classroom at home, your beanbag, wherever you're watching from, and we'll give you a few seconds to get set up. In the meantime, Jason, shall we dance while we wait?
Yeah, shall we dance indeed. Let's celebrate the season.
Let's celebrate. All right, cue that music. All right, I think we're ready, Jason. Let's take those selfies. Will you do the countdown for us?
3, 2, 1, go!
I love it, Jason. Thank you so much for being here. Your energy is so contagious. I hope everyone out there is having a good time and learning a lot just like I am. And we'd love to see those selfies. So please post them on social by tagging at Microsoft Flip and at Mote Marine Lab. All right, it's time for the questions. So.
Oh, well, let me put my thinking cap on.
The Gary from Dr. Schopert's class wants to know, is global warming affecting any of the migration patterns? Interesting.
Yeah, that's a great question. And you remember that little sea angel that we saw before? This is a little tiny animal that also has a little tiny shell inside of it. There's other similar species that also form those little tiny shells. And global warming may be affecting those. And it's important because those are the base of a lot of ocean food webs. So if they disappear, a lot of other animals might be impacted by that. And the twin of global warming is a phenomenon that we call ocean acidification. Have you ever heard of that before? It's kind of a weird phenomenon where the oceans actually get a little bit more acidic, so much so that those little tiny animals that build shells, like the jingle shells and the pteropods, the sea angels, have a harder time making their shells, protecting themselves. And so the scientists think that they might actually be dramatically affected by changes not only in the temperature of the ocean, but also the acidity that we have. And yes, we are seeing perhaps that some of these animals will also be affected by changing temperatures in the ocean. Not only does it mean that we may have less ice up there in the polar seas, where things like polar bears and those narwhals like to live, it also means that areas further south around the equator may be warmer. Thus, it'll probably disrupt the migration patterns. And if you're an animal like a coral that settles down and sits your entire life settled on the seas, you can't just pick up and move. So that's having a dramatic impact on coral reefs as well. And that's something that we study here at Mote.
That's so fascinating too, especially with just a comment on that, because it's not necessarily that it affects all the different fish with global warming, but it could affect the kind of a foundational fish that kind of creates a domino effect for the rest of the sea life. So very, very interesting. We do have another question from a 6th grade student. How do you feel when you release a rehabilitated animal?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so that's our ultimate goal here at Mote, is to nurse these animals back to health and then get them back out into the ocean where they can be productive parts of their population. And so any chance we get, we try to do that. Sometimes we get animals that we are deemed non-releasable by the state of Florida, but that's pretty rare. But if they are here, they're one of our forever friends and they act as animal ambassadors. So we have a few sea turtles here like Shelly and Montego and Hang Tough that have injuries or health problems that make it impossible for us to really let them go safely. But for all the other animals, that feels great to let them back out into the ocean and have them swim along their way. Can be very expensive, though. So that's one of the things we'll talk about, too, is how you can help support the kind of conservation efforts that Mote makes. In fact, that is, one of the things that you can do if you're interested is actually help us bring up some of these animals and release them by making a donation through mote.org/adopt. You can adopt a sea turtle, a shark, a seahorse, a manatee, an otter, or a jellyfish. And that's a great way to support those kind of conservation efforts. And then you can feel good about it, too.
Amazing. Thanks again for sharing that, Jason. And I think we have time for one more question. Emma would like to know, how long does it take to get the turtles back to their homes?
Yeah, so the weird thing about the Gulf of Mexico is a big current of warm water, and I encourage you to research that with your class or your family. And then they have these warm water eddies that spin off of it, and sometimes the turtles get confused and caught in there. And so if we can find them, and the aquariums sometimes have volunteers that go out and look for them, They'll bring them back as quickly as possible. Sometimes they'll keep them at their facilities for short periods of time, but we want to get the volunteers flying them down here to our safe, warm water areas in Texas, Florida, and elsewhere. And then we try to nurse them back to health. And it really depends on how long they've been cold stunned. Sometimes it can be a matter of weeks. Sometimes it can be months that we have to hold them. And then sometimes we'll time it so that they're released at the right season. So if we know that the best place and best time is to let them go a few weeks or months later, we might wait a little while before letting them go. Good questions.
Yeah, great questions. Well, we're about to wrap up our show, but Jason, I want to ask, any final thoughts you'd like to share with everyone watching today?
Yeah, I love connecting with audiences all over the world using Teams and other programs from Microsoft, including a new one for us is Take Lessons. And if you go to takelessons.com and check out, we have a virtual tour of our aquarium coming after the aquarium closes. So from 5:30 p.m. Eastern to 6:15 Eastern, I believe it's on February 16th, we'll be taking a virtual tour and lesson around the aquarium, meeting some of the sea creatures that we have. And we're going to be adding a lot more neat activities and lessons on Take Lessons very soon. So check that out.
Jason, it's always a joy. Thank you for your time and for inspiring all of us to learn more about this special season under the sea. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
All right, that was amazing. And as you know, the learning and inspiration is never over. You can learn more about the ocean, underwater animals, and more from Mote Marine Laboratory over at Take Lessons. So head on over to aka.ms/Mote Aquarium to sign up for more lessons with Jason. And before wrapping up, don't forget, we host these events every week. On January 26th, we'll be kicking off National News Literacy Week with the News Literacy Project and Teens for Press Freedom. Then on February 1st, we will be celebrating World Read Aloud Day with author Nick Bruhl. Head on over to aka.ms/flip events to register for your next adventure today. That's it for today. I'm your host, George, and on behalf of Team Flip, Mote Marine Laboratory, and our amazing guest, Jason, thank you for spending time with us, and we'll see you next time.